Hype Man, Raj Nation, the GOAT to market. From Hype HQ in Chicago, Illinois, Startup Hype Man presents the GOAT to Market Show. What's up, everyone? I am your host, Raj Nation, the founder and chief pitch artist of Startup Hype Man. This podcast is where we bring you founders, company leaders, and creatives who are building it, who are doing it, who have been there and done that. And they pull back the curtain on their go-to-market strategies so that you can build a venture that you love and become the GOAT of your industry. Want first listen on episodes before anyone else? Subscribe to our newsletter at startuphypeman.com. You will get alerts every Sunday morning when we release new episodes. All right, let's hear how today's guest is becoming the GOAT. Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the microphone from Hawaii by way of Los Angeles and currently residing in Chicago, Illinois, he is the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Sales Assembly. Please welcome to the Hype Man stage, Matt Green.
Good to be here, my man. Thank you. Thank you for the amazing introduction.
He is Matt Green, like I mentioned, co-founder and CRO of Sales Assembly. What is Sales Assembly? They are out here to help revenue teams be more successful, more capable, more intelligent, and generate more revenue on behalf of their companies through trainings, certifications, programming, events, curriculum-based learnings, all those kinds of things. They are scale as a service, as they like to say, with tons of member companies across the B2B tech space, originally starting with just Chicago, but they've expanded nationally and globally at this point. At the end of the day, Sales Assembly is elevated learning and development for go-to-market teams. Sales Assembly got their start in 2017, same year that Startup Hype Man did. And over the years, they've had quite the ascension, growing to a multiple seven-figure company, growing 300% revenue growth over the last 4 years, building a team in the process, and doing it all while bootstrapping. So they're a really great success story to follow. And I've had the opportunity to be on Sales Assembly's stage in the past, do some collaboration partner work with them. I've gotten to know Matt a lot over the last 7 years. We were just talking before hitting the record button, how we're like dinosaurs who are still standing with the same company 7 years later in the tech world. And one of the things that I have always been able to observe about Sales Assembly that I have been fascinated by, and I think they do very well, is event-led growth. So, Matt, welcome to the GOAT to Market show. Why is this on your mind? Event-led growth. Why is it on your mind, and why is it important to you?
No, thanks again for having me. Thanks for the question. Event-led growth. Why is it on our mind? Why is it important? Because it is, well, number one, it's always been sort of bred within our DNA. As you sort of alluded to earlier on, we got started here in Chicago. Everything that we did was live and in person in different places around the city. So just bringing together people in curated rooms has always been just a core part of our business. Enter a global pandemic in 2020, and there was about a good year and a half where people just physically could not do that. And once it became a little bit more conducive for people to gather together in some of these rooms, we made it a big initiative of ours for two reasons. Number one, we just like the idea of bringing the community together. We figured that there is an appetite for that, just for the whole purpose of community building. But number two, when we talk about growth, we found it an amazing way to get in front of prospects in a manner that they were not really used to, right? Prospects that we sell to are revenue leaders of B2B software companies, VPs of sales and CROs. These folks tend to get hit up all day long, as we know, by email, LinkedIn DMs, cold calls, all the rest. What they do not tend to do is be invited into small curated dinners that are filled with other people exactly like them that they want to meet from across the B2B tech ecosystem. So we started leveraging these as a really big growth engine of ours, and they've been extremely successful over the past few years.
We'll unpack all of the strategy behind that as we dive into today's conversation. Before we go there, let's learn a little bit more about Matt, the person. Now, I just learned before we hit record that you grew up in Hawaii. You've lived in Chicago for, almost 20 years now. You're coming up on 20 years. Very different speed here versus Hawaii. But this also explains why you have a natural tan.
That and the fact that I'm half Italian. So yeah.
Okay. All right.
lean into it. Yeah.
The last name Green threw me off. I wasn't thinking Italian with that. Okay. So aside from the tan and also being half Italian with the tan, what do you feel you have still carried with you from the culture of Hawaii that, amidst not being there for so long, that is still part of you today?
That's an interesting question. I like to think, and I'm not really great at talking positively about myself. I mean, it's not in my nature, but I like to think a sense of laid backness, if that's even the term. I like to feel as though I've always been relatively even keeled, either in work or in personal life. Can't remember a single time, I've raised my voice, about anything. It's just, zen and mellow. So if there is something that is, traditionally Islander-ish, if you might want to call it that I think is still hanging with me today, it's just that, that state of just mellowness all around.
I would agree with that assessment. I think if I think of your natural disposition, if I think of Matt Green, I think of a very like neutral temperament. You're right. I've not seen you raise your voice ever, not even in like a happy way, or not a mad way, but not in like an excited way either. And I kind of picture you like in the back of the room sipping your coffee. That's the impression that I always have. And
again, I know that we'll talk more about events, but at events, just sitting in the back corner by myself and like sipping on either coffee or a glass of wine, that is my ideal state scenario. So I know it's a little bit of a dichotomy, like me not wanting to really engage in these events because I want to just be back somewhere quiet, but it's a very good call out.
Yeah, it's quite the we are exact opposites in that respect. I am like the loud person in the front of the room. So there's a Lil Wayne lyric that has resurfaced recently through like TikTok and like that, like Gen Z like just discovered this lyric that's like 15 years old. And Lil Wayne had I don't remember what song, but this was probably in like 2009. He rapped, "Real G's move in silence like lasagna." And I think that's a Matt Green line right there. You're a real G and you move in silence like lasagna.
I appreciate that. I'll take it. Yeah, that sounds amazing to me.
One other thing people may not know about you, because oftentimes when you are in public settings, you're wearing long sleeves, is that you're quite tatted up. What is your favorite tattoo and why?
That they're all, it's hard to answer because they're all rub on, right? I just put them on every morning just so that I look cool. No, I am partial to the sleeve on that goes down most of it 3/4 down the way of my right arm for two reasons. Number one, the initial motivation was to cover up one of those armbands that I got as a dumb teenager. I remember I was 17 years old, we're just about to graduate high school. All the friends that I went with were 18 years old. So we wanted to go get tattoos so that we could look tough and cool and all that. And in the process of trying to look tough and cool, because I was under 18, I had to have my mom come in behind me and sign a release so that I could get a tattoo, which automatically sort of negated the coolness factor and the toughness factor. So there's that, and then you can't really see it, so I won't bother making it out right here. But there's an ancient Gaelic dialect called Oyam, is how you pronounce it, and I have my son's birthday, which is the symbols, at least, that are part of this tattoo. So has a special meaning to me.
Yeah, that's great. The average child growing up, I would say the majority of people who work in sales today did not grow up saying, when I grow up, I want to work in sales. What was your foray? Like, how did you even first get started in sales?
Like a lot of other salespeople, accidentally, and because I had really no other viable options at the time, or was just kind of lost. So I remember in high school, when I was in ninth grade, I think, I went on, my family and I traveled to the East Coast to look at colleges for my older brother. And during that trip, I remember touring the FBI headquarters. I said, "Oh my God, this is it. This is what I want to do." So I planned for it, studied criminal justice in college and had planned on going into a career in the FBI. And the day that I graduated, I woke up and for some reason, like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And what does someone do when they can't follow or decided to have not followed the career path that they had studied for? Tend to fall into sales. So yeah, I started working in sales at a small company called American Express. It was actually American Express Financial Advisors. No salary, no benefits, 300 cold calls a day, 6 days a week, including Saturday. And that's how I was brought up in this industry.
Wow. Wow. The no, so I've never done I guess aside from running my own business and getting
Yeah.
that started, I've never done for someone else the no salary, only commission thing. How do you, if you think back to that time, like, how do you operate day to day knowing that there's no guarantee on the other side?
Yeah, they like to think, and of course, there is an argument for this that it is, an additional motivating factor. If I don't make an additional 5, 10, 15, 20 dials, I'm not going to have the opportunity to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And, in their, I'm not sure if you want to call this a defense, but the environment that they built there was very similar to the movie Boiler Room,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where everything was really pumped up and exciting and like, hey, here's how much money you're going to make if you do this, that, and the other thing, and very competitive. But yeah, at the same time, leadership would, every 2 weeks, that we would have a new class start of where, my first day was me and 8 or 9 other people. Leadership would take bets on how many of us would quit within the first week. That was just the type of environment that we operated in.
Through that experience, obviously you liked it enough to stay in sales for a long time. And then you end up with your co-founder, Jeff Rossett, in 2017, starting something called Sales Assembly. But I don't know if it was originally Sales Assembly or was it originally Venture Scale, or was Venture Scale maybe an offshoot program of Sales Assembly? Can you kind of talk about the founding journey here?
Yeah, so one clarification for what it's worth, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. I'd say I did well enough at it
Okay.
to justify continue doing it. So
Okay.
yeah, it's just small difference there. But yeah, the quick version is continued working in the financial services industry. Got an opportunity to move here to be a part of a new division of JP Morgan here in Chicago. Did that for a number of years. As I was working in that industry, I got recruited to join a Series A startup here in Chicago as one of the sales leaders. Jeff, who I had met serving on the board of a charity a few years prior, he was one of the first people that I hired over there to work on my team. So we had worked there together for a good year and a half. Wake up January of 2016, LOL, we both got riffed along with a good percentage of the company. So we're just forced in this position where it's like, okay, what do we do? Do we go find W-2 jobs or do we kick around some other ideas? And sales assembly actually was initially Jeff's idea. Prior to that, we had kicked around a couple of other ideas that hadn't gotten off the ground. But Jeff had this idea for sales assembly, which really started just as a community for VP and C level revenue leaders of B2B tech companies that were here in Chicago, because we saw that none had existed and we saw that there was an appetite for these types of leaders back in Chicago in the 2017, 2018 sort of era to get together to exchange ideas and best practices.
Mm. Now, the original version of Sales Assembly was these in-person events. So let's kind of use this as the on-ramp into our primary topic today, which is mastering event-led growth. There, you can start a company like that, but like, I've hosted a lot. I've hosted events before. Like it's not easy to pull off. Even if the event itself is very enjoyable, I think it's you don't really ever recognize like what it takes to pull it off. Even just like, I don't know, getting 20 people together can be a task. So what made you be like, this is the way we want to like be valuable to this community instead of, I don't know, you could have gone like, we're going to build software. You could have said, we're going to be a services based company and do like, our own training or stuff like that. You kind of just went like the immediate community play. Talk through that strategy.
Yeah, one thing to point out to the point that you made a few moments ago, getting 20 people in the room, the difficulty of that. And we'll talk more about this later, but a big part of it is getting 20 of the right people in the room. Always just having that framing in your mind. But why did we go down this road as far as employing this strategy from the beginning? A lot of it, we like to think, was just reacting to market demand. Right. Back in the around the time that we launched Sales Assembly, there was no Revenue Collective, now Pavilion, right? That was actually just getting started around the same time, but it wasn't here in Chicago. So there was really no forum for executive level sales leaders, especially of B2B tech companies like Sprout Social or G2 or Power Reviews or Spot Hero, companies that were on the upswing. They were scaling really quickly. But the leaders there, many of them were doing this for the very first time, right? So having an opportunity, they were searching for an opportunity to just connect with their counterparts, people that were doing their exact same job, just at other fast growing B2B tech companies. They wanted to come together. So we just took the ownership, if you want to call it that, of just creating environments where not only they could come together, they would enjoy coming together and provide some type of learning and thought leadership opportunities as well. So always made sure that there is some sort of purpose behind the event, in addition to priority number one, which was just giving them a forum to connect and collaborate with their peers.
All right. So for everyone who's unaware, at this point, I'm going to fast forward. So at this point, the product Sales Assembly actually has for purchase is it's like a platform-based training product. Like you can log into Sales Assembly if you're a customer. You can take there's different tracks where you can get certified in like being an SDR leader, just to name one example. There are one-off video trainings as well. There's also live trainings, things like that. So that's like the modern day product of Sales Assembly. But your lead flow, if you will, or at least one of your sources of lead flow, is events. At first, the product was just the event itself. Now the event is, and I don't want to mischaracterize, so I'll once I finish talking, you can correct whatever needs to be corrected. But now you've got events as a top funnel activity. The primary events that at least I'm aware of are the Remix event, which happens a couple times a year in different locations. And that's like a half-day conference where you've got a handful of talks, fireside chats, and pretty power networking that takes place. And then you've got these quarterly CRO or CXO dinners that are taking place around the country as well, where let's say it's like 15, 20, maybe up to 30 people. They've got to be of a certain caliber, getting them together at a restaurant, 4 or 5 tables and having dinner together for conversation. So I don't know a better way to ask this other than can you walk us through the playbook behind putting together, let's start with Remix. So the half-day conference. What is the playbook in putting this together? And how do you go from we're going to host this event to we have now hot leads on the other side of this?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So starting with Remix, that the concept of Remix was we took a look at every other conference or industry trade show out there, and we said, okay, well, let's try to do something that's kind of the exact opposite. Hence the name Remix. And what is the opposite of a traditional trade show? Traditional trade show, 2 or 3 days. Tickets are anywhere between $500 to $1,500. You walk in, lanyard, sponsor booths everywhere, swag, product pitches, all that good stuff. We said no one wants any more of those. There's enough of those, right? So what if we put together something where you didn't have to book a hotel? It's only half day, to your point before. Do we have sponsors of these events? Absolutely, but we do not have sponsored booths, because if you're a VP of sales or CRO, You walk into a room like this, you don't need a USB charger. You don't need a fidget spinner. You don't need a branded t-shirt, right? Nor do you want any of that stuff. You get sent that kind of stuff all the time. On stage, you don't want to hear about the new AI product that just rolled out. You want to hear leaders that, again, have your job title that have been doing the job maybe 5 to 7 years longer than you. Maybe they've taken the company public before, and they're walking through how they're going to take their current company public, how they've built their go-to-market motion. So we wanted to, again, just flip the sort of traditional industry conference on its head and create a new experience that people would naturally be drawn to. And what that is Remix, where, like I said, half-day event, the content is curated, especially for executive level revenue leaders. We do not sell tickets. We don't monetize ticket sales at all. It's invite only. And the only people that we invite are executive level revenue leaders from B2B SaaS. So again, going back to the original theme, it's combining content with a sense of community amongst a very curated demographic. So once we have that experience put together, it's really easy for us to fill the room with, let's say, 150 people. Maybe 75, 100 of them are current Sales Assembly members and customers, VPs of sales and CROs and VPs of CS and VPs of RevOps from the companies that we work with. And the balance are going to be companies that are not members of Sales Assembly, but we like to become members of Sales Assembly. So they're in that room. They see this really cool experience. And who are they surrounded by? Our advocates. People that when they're hobnobbing and they're enjoying happy hour, when they're shaking hands and just having good conversations, these are people that are naturally going to talk about Sales Assembly in a really positive way, which will make the prospects much more inclined to hop on a call with us afterwards and talk about how they can potentially get them and their companies engaged in Sales Assembly.
Okay, so I want to break down a couple of things you mentioned. Let's come back to the sponsorship aspect. I know earlier I mentioned like the product now is the technology platform and the training, but you are still able to make the event itself revenue generating and a revenue product through selling sponsorships. But like you mentioned, it's not a typical sponsorship. You don't have booths, it's not a lanyard or whatever you might see. There's no fidget spinners, things like that. What's the value prop you're selling to that sponsor if they're like, well, but if I go to this if I do this conference, I get this presence, I get a booth, I get to speak on stage, this, that, and the other. I know you've got the targeted audience, but can you kind of like shape how you're saying, yeah, but this is still valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke to it a moment ago with the target audience, right? So yeah, I mean, if you want to go to a big conference and spend 50, 75, 100, 150 grand on a booth, and sure, you will get hundreds, if not thousands of people walking by that booth day in and day out and maybe taking some of the swag and dropping their business card, if they still have business cards, in a fishbowl or, whatever people do these days. But who are those people going to be, right? It's going to be, I'm sure they're all going to be great people, but as far as job titles and do they fit your ICP, it's going to be a mishmash, right? Sure, you might have some revenue leaders if you sell the revenue leaders like we do, but you might have some AEs, some engineers, some investors. And again, all great people, not the types of people that you paid tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to meet. Sales Assembly, what you spoke about a moment ago, the crowd is what we're selling, right? So if you are a company that has a product or service, a company like Gong that we've been fortunate enough to partner with over the past 6 years, or a company like Lavender that we partnered with over the past 2 to 3 years, you have a product or service that you want to sell to VPs of sales and CROs, I can tell you, I could essentially guarantee you that in this room, there's going to be 150 VPs of sales and CROs. And if you want proof of that, here's the attendee list of all the other Remix events that we've done over the past few years so that you can validate that, right? And sure, we're going to give you branding. We are going to provide, some other opportunities for you to maybe engage with a crowd while you're there. But the value is going to be your sales team is sending these people emails all day long. They're cold calling them. They're not responding. You want to meet them in person, they're all going to be here, right? And they're all going to be here for this half-day period. Let's give you and your sales team an opportunity to meet these folks in person and build authentic relationships that you can then follow up on after the event.
I might have misspoke earlier when I said they don't get stage time if they're a sponsor. Is that an option if someone's paying the right sponsor level?
It is an option. It candidly doesn't have anything to do with spend. It has to do with whether or not, and this goes back to the curation of the content. It has to do with whether or not we think that the content that they're going to provide is going to be conducive and befitting the executive level crowd. So what we will not have under any circumstances is a vendor up on stage talking about their product. But if we have a vendor on a company that just happens to be a vendor on stage and they're talking about really compelling research, right? So for example, Challenger has been a sponsor of ours over the past couple of years. We've had them on stage multiple times, whether they've paid to be on stage or not, simply because we know from experience that they always bring really compelling research and insights that the VPs of sales and CROs in the audience love consuming. And that's what matters most to us.
Now, it is very easy for, if a sponsor to get on stage it's very easy for them to do a product talk and almost a demo. Can you share how, like, what's your process for really being like scrutinous to make sure it is going to be valuable content? Do they have to like submit slides in advance? Do they have to run the content by you first? How are you actually vetting that?
Yeah, all of the above. Not only do we set expectations well in advance, if we're going to engage in a sponsorship arrangement, we being me as the person that traditionally sells these things, sets expectations as far as like, hey, here's what it needs to look like, right? And again, money aside, whether or not we want you up on stage, that's going to be entirely up to us, right? And a big part of that is going to be, like you said, just vetting the content well in advance, both with the leadership team and the product team that we have here at Sales Assembly.
All right. Okay. So you've got that like vetting in place. Let's shift now away from the sponsor talk into the audience and the curated group you have there. It's filled with existing members. And by the way, this is a very timely conversation because I believe your most recent remix, as of this recording, your most recent remix happened like 5 days ago.
Yeah, 1 week ago today, actually.
Yeah. So it's very timely and top of mind. The makeup of the attendees, are you intentional about how much percent is existing customers versus how much are prospects you're inviting to attend? And by the way, is there a ticket price associated with it?
Yeah, so there's no ticket price. So we don't monetize tickets at all. We don't charge anybody to enter, but at the same time, you can't get access unless we invite you, right? So again, that does give us the opportunity to curate the crowd to the, in air quotes, for those of you that can't see this, the right type of people, the type of people that we want to meet and that other attendees want to meet. To your earlier question, we are intentional-ish around the pie chart visualization around what percentage is existing members, what percentage is prospective members. I mean, as you can imagine, I'm sure that it's easy to presume that we prefer that there are more prospects in the room than members. But that just tends to be not the reality, right? So as long as we have, a good 60-40 or 70-30 mix between members and prospective members, we would consider that an extremely successful event.
Okay. I want to go a little bit more into these prospective members. Before we go there, I want to take a step back for our listeners. I mentioned earlier, Sales Assembly's core product is technology. So if you're listening right now and you have a technology product, then you want to make sure it's built the right way. And what do you do in that case to make sure that it's built the right way? Well, you want to make sure you've got the right partner if you don't have an engineer in-house. And that right partner is a company called Akeva. And I like to think of them as the GOAT of software development. The reality is, I personally have seen way too many startups that I'd like to admit get screwed over by using offshore or budget dev shops. And those offshore and budget shops, they are providers who are order takers. They will do the bare minimum. And that often really means your software has gaping holes in it. I've got a couple nightmare stories of that from some of our clients. Or you're forced to pay hidden release fees to claim ownership of your code. And then there's Akeva, who doesn't do any of that. They actually build strategically for scale from day one. They act as your advisor along the way, and they will say, I know you wanted to do it this way. We think it should be done this way. And the other way they might recommend is actually possible. It's going to cost you less money if it makes more sense for your overall build. So they help you make product decisions along the way. They also give you full ownership of your code by default. So all of that said, they've got a killer offer for you, and it's a you call it code review. Akeva will review the most critical parts of your code so you can see exactly what your tech needs to launch or scale. And they'll do this completely for free, and then you call it from there. So do you want to handle things on your own? You call it. Do you want to get Akeva's dev help? You call it. Do you want to just take it somewhere else to a different provider? You call it. It's an unbeatable offer that you really want to take them up on. And whether you are, again, building your software for the first time or refining something that's already out there, or you need to retool to scale up, Akeva is who you need to have in your corner. So if you're ready for a You Call It code review, if you're ready to see if you qualify for a You Call It code review, and if you're ready to get goated, head to akeva.io. That's akava.io, akeva.io, and tell them Startup Hype Man sent you. Today on the Goat to Market show, we're with Matt Green, the co-founder and CRO of Sales Assembly, and we're talking about mastering event-led growth. So, Matt, the idea of the attendee breakdown, you talked about, you kind of got the pie chart in mind, but it doesn't have to be exact. Let's talk about the prospects slice of that pie chart. So I feel like you've got reputation on your side at this point, so that definitely helps. But what does it take to get someone who doesn't really know you yet? And I don't mean you personally. I mean the Sales Assembly brand, right? They may not know the Sales Assembly brand yet, and you're inviting them to this event. And I will say this as well. Free is not always easier to get someone to come to. Sometimes they can be like, oh, it's free. It's going to be, like advertising fest where I'm just going to be hit with a bunch of sponsor messages. So what does the outreach look like there?
Yeah, great question. So usually twofold. Number one, we're big into leveraging the existing members and advocates, right? It's relatively easy for us to say to, again, our audience, which is all VPs of sales and CROs, like any other demographic, these people tend to know a whole lot of other people like them. Right. So whether it's just a general like, hey, who do you know that should come to this that, might not be yet, or us doing the work, which we do tend to operate in this manner. We actually do the work, go on, let's say your LinkedIn profile and say like, hey, Raj, I know that you're connected to these one or two people. They would make great audience members. What do we think about getting them access to the event? So that's one big way that tends to work. And another big way, and this goes back to the value of having a curated audience. And I don't understand why I do understand why more event organizers don't do this, because they don't have such a curated audience, but we lead with our attendee list, right? If we're reaching out cold to an executive level revenue leader that, again, is getting pitched stuff all the time, and we say, hey, come to this event, here's the agenda, it's free. And oh, hey, by the way, here's an Excel sheet. About 100 names on it right now. You're going to see all the names, job titles, companies, right? And you're going to be able to see that, hey, wow, this is a really gangster list. These are people that I recognize. These are brands that I recognize. If they're all going to this event, must mean that there's something here, right? So we usually follow those two tracks to get it done.
So there's a little bit of like FOMO that you're able to build in with that.
Yeah, it's a combination of FOMO and we shouldn't sleep on just the general concept of credibility, right? That there is the whole strength in numbers argument. I think that the same applies when you're talking about bringing together an event of a very targeted group of individuals. Just them seeing a very credible, we like to think, credible RSVP list of other executive level revenue leaders goes a long way towards motivating them to join.
Okay, I like that approach. And, if you rewind, 4 or 5 years ago when it was a much smaller team, I have to imagine you and your co-founder, Jeff, are actually probably doing a lot of this outreach yourself. Now you've got, you have account executives on the team, you have salespeople on the team. Is there any loss of like fidelity or trust when it is like when it's you doing the outreach, it's a peer reaching out to another peer. So is there any loss there when it's, someone who's technically not a peer, an account executive reaching out to a CRO?
Yeah, that there's validity in that, and there could be. I still do all of it, or all of it, most of it,
Okay.
and in large part for that exact reason. Not only that exact reason from that peer-to-peer component, but also when we're making the asks of invitations, especially the plus one strategy. Who are we asking? We're asking, the VPs of sales and CROs that traditionally, I sold the bulk of those, to become members of Sales Assembly in the first place. So I already have a pre-established relationship with them. It's easy for me to go in there and say like, hey, we talk every month, every few months, whatever the case may be, we keep in touch. We have this relationship. I know that you're coming to this event. Why don't you invite this one or two people or these one or two people that I see you're connected to on
Hmm.
LinkedIn?
All right. So you're still involved in the process, and then that's helping bring them in. The other side is now like the output of the event, right? So it's one thing to get people to be, existing members to be talking about it, talking
Mhm.
about how they love the platform, all that stuff to prospective members at the event. And I'm sure that creates some natural inbound interest, but still the average person is not coming out of that being like, oh, the first thing I'm going to do coming out of this event is reach out to the sales assembly team to see how I can sign up for their platform.
Yep.
What is the outreach look like coming out of the event?
Yeah, so it's twofold. Number one, it's being intentional during the event, making sure, and I know that this can be tough when there's 100 plus people in the room, but making sure that we are allocating our time appropriately to, meaningfully engaging with the prospects that we have in the room. Even in many cases, setting up some time on site where it's like, hey, I'll shoot you a DM, I'll shoot you a note right after this. Let's set up some time to connect next week, right? Making sure that we're capitalizing on the fact that we still do have them there in person. But then post event, answering your question more directly, just like any other type of prospect follow up, it's all about speed and urgency, right? We don't let a week, 2 weeks go by. We had our most recent remix event, as you mentioned before, on Friday, last Friday. On Monday, we made sure that all of our follow up emails went out, if not over the weekend, because we know that the executives, by nature, they tend to be a little bit more engaged in their email over the weekend. So it's easier to catch them on a Sunday afternoon, right? So just
Interesting.
following up with a really brief message to say like, hey, great meeting you, had a great conversation, man. I wish that we had the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more. When can we hop on a call, or when can I buy you a cup of coffee sometime over the next 2 weeks, and just making sure that we get it on the books as soon as possible.
Yeah. Okay. So this is pretty interesting. You're intentionally sending an email on the weekend because this buyer group, this target audience is less busy and likely checking their inbox at that time. And you're not getting like pushback about like, why are you contacting me on the weekend?
Nope, no, not at all. And if they're not engaging with their emails, they won't respond, right? That they'll respond on Monday, they'll respond on Tuesday. But yeah, by and large, and we don't want to paint with broad brushstrokes, but in a general sense, executives are plugged in over the weekend, and they do spend a decent amount of time on Sunday afternoon getting ready for the week. And when you hit them in their inbox when nobody else is, stands out, easier to reply to.
And is that message, and perhaps you'll reiterate what you just said, is it as simple as was great meeting you, would love to talk about, would love to learn more about what you guys are doing and see if we're a fit, this week?
Yeah, and even simpler than that. I mean, I don't necessarily talk about like, hey, let's hop on the phone so I could tell you more about sales assembly for two reasons. Number one, just not in my nature. I legitimately don't want to do that. I don't want to set a call. I mean, just to pitch. And number two, what did they just come out of? They just came out of an event where they got to experience sales assembly, right? So it is more about me just wanting to make a connection at a human to human level and seeing if there is legitimately I could do to add value to them in their business. Now, during that conversation, they will probably proactively bring up sales assembly, and they will ask me more about it. And if they do, I'll tell them about it. We'll see if it makes sense to talk about it more. If they don't, at least I met a really great new executive level revenue leader that I could keep in touch with, invite to more events. And now that they know at least some semblance of what we do, maybe they'll want to engage with us in the future.
Let's talk about that email just a little bit, just for a little bit longer. So that follow-up email sending out, are you doing it as each person's getting an individual email, or is it, one message, maybe segmented a couple different ways, just sent as like a mass blast?
Yeah, so we will have both. So we'll have like the traditional marketing email that you would send out from like, an active campaign or a HubSpot or something like that. Like here's the event recap and here's all the slides and photos and all that good stuff. But nobody responds to that. What will they respond to is that personal, hey Raj, great chatting with you. Love learning more. You're talking about your family. You're talking about, this trip that you just went on. Love learning more about that, trying to sprinkle in some legitimate personalization and what you actually heard during the conversation. And again, like I said before, it's like, hey, it'd be great to catch up more outside of such a loud environment. When can we hop on the call?
One of the ways that so if I take a smaller version of events, it's webinars. And that's something that has been part of the Startup Hype Man, like kind of reliable go-to-market channel over the last several years, is doing a pitch workshop, which I do quite regularly with different audiences, and then sending out a follow-up sequence after that, which is, email one is going to be, thanks for attending. Here's the follow-up resources I promised you. And here's my calendar link. If you're ready to move on this, if you're ready to talk about your pitch and discuss, your goals. And then there's a drip sequence that follows that. And that's been, it's interesting because in the webinar itself, I'll get some contingent of people who, before the webinar is even done, they will have booked a meeting. Either they'll have gone to my website, or the last slide in the webinar deck has a QR code on it that just, if you scan it, it goes to my Calendly page, which that's a technique I learned from someone else that's quite effective. And then what I find interesting is like follow-up email, not the first follow-up email, but follow-up email like 2 or 3 generates a second wave. And that second or third email is coming like 3 and 6 days after the original event. And that ability to like remind people that you're there, I found to be very, very useful, because even if they love the content, if they thought about reaching out, it's just they get busy with other stuff. So you just have those like bumper reminders progressively that let them know you're there. And by the way, like, here's the thing to meet if you want to meet. And I've been using Active Campaign for that. It's been really helpful. Anyone who's listening, you probably know by now, Active Campaign is a partner of the show. We've got a 2-week trial link in the show notes if you want to check them out. But coming back to Sales Assembly's method, and I will say, like, in my process, I'll do the automated. And then if there were a couple people who I could kind of spot during it who were like really, really engaged, I'll also send them a personal email. Mm-hmm. Do you find when you're doing kind of like, I think the air coverage, let's call the automation the air coverage, I think that's really important. Do you find when you're doing that they are, if they're not catching the personal, are you ever catching them in like, that second or third or fourth automated follow-up?
Yeah. Short answer is yes. I mean, the one caveat is that we don't have a whole lot of automation set up from a prospecting perspective. It is a little bit more manual, but we do it, right? Mm. And why is it not automated? Because we're always trying to, in any type of outreach, even if it's on the second or third step, which again, very similar to you, we don't have a whole lot of people, or we don't have everyone on the first step. Like, oh yeah, they respond right away. It usually does take, a nudge or two, but we always want to make sure that we're infusing some type of personalization, right? Mm-hmm. So for example, if in email one, I mentioned like, hey, Raj, tell me about, your family. I'm going to mention that in email one. In email two, like, hey, you also told me about this trip that you went on. So again, I'm going to try to piece together like, okay, what is going to be just one or two other components I can build into the email so that Raj knows that this is me. And I'm a human. This is an automation. I'm just trying to connect with you on an authentic human to human level. And another reason why we don't necessarily use a whole lot of automation in that regards, because we like being able to mix up email with LinkedIn, A lot of times just that pattern interrupt of getting out of their inbox and sliding into their DMs on LinkedIn does tend to sort of break the cycle of them not responding.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it doesn't hurt to be in multiple places.
Yeah.
You don't know at what point you're catching them in their day. Like, I'm sure you're very similar in that, like, by the time this podcast is done, I will probably have 49 new emails in my inbox, mostly that are like prospecting emails from other people, or like newsletters I'm subscribed to, with some blend of like existing client emails or something like that. So it's very easy to miss something.
Yeah.
And then if you can do like that double tap into the LinkedIn inbox, and you've already built that familiarity because you've met in person, it really helps catch someone, because a lot of times if I'm like, I don't know, in line getting a coffee somewhere, I might be like on the LinkedIn mobile app, and then maybe the message comes up there. So it's more convenient in that moment to be able to respond in that, versus sometimes it could be the exact same response, but sometimes email just feels overwhelming.
Yeah, that's 100%. Yeah, it's a big reason why we do it. Just like I said, for that pattern interrupt.
One more question, and then we'll go into our wrap up. You're obviously not able to talk to every single person who comes to an event. Do you find a higher conversion rate on people you talk to versus people you don't talk to, or even faster close rate, maybe if it's not higher conversion rate?
Yes. Yes, on the higher conversion, definitely. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned before, as far as the value of these events and why we structure them the way that we do. It's all in service of just building authentic relationships with people. And now, whether or not our service is a good fit for them or not, decide that at a later time. If it's not, don't want to push it, we'll keep in touch. It's going to be great to have them in our network. But yeah, I mean, once you build that level of familiarity, right, after having engaged with someone in person, it does make the entire sales process getting to either yes or no, right? And no is just as valuable if you get there quick. Getting to either yes or no a whole lot sooner than you may have otherwise.
Yeah, and I think no doesn't necessarily mean no forever. It just means no right now. And then if you've got your marketing newsletter going out, they're kind of staying in the content ecosystem long term.
Exactly.
Let's hit our wrap up now. First off, Matt, where can listeners find you? Where can they learn more about Sales Assembly?
Yeah, they can go to our website, salesassembly.com. I'm very on LinkedIn. So, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, it'd be great to connect with you there as well.
Who is one person you want to give a shout out to who's been helpful on your journey?
One person, she gets a lot of shout outs, but she's worth every single one of them. Sam McKenna, who many people listen to this podcast might know. If they don't, they should begin following her on LinkedIn. I like to think that we operate in a very similar manner. We've both been building businesses over the past 5-6 years, so it's been great to we actually have a monthly a standing monthly connect, her and I, where we just talk about like what's going on, what's working well, what's not working well. So having that type of support outside the four walls of Sales Assembly has been extremely valuable, and she's just a great person all around. And the sales knowledge bombs that she drops are much, much, much better than anything that I could ever do. So please do follow her if you're not already.
I will second that. She's a great follow, and she drops amazing knowledge, and a lot of it, I'll be like, it's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I was doing it this way, but I was never doing it that way or that degree of that before. So definitely, everyone give her a follow. We'll now do our final one or two lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on the discussion today. I'll go first and I'll toss it back to you. The topic today was mastering event-led growth. We covered a lot of really good stuff. The note that I wrote down, if I can read my own handwriting here, is if you are hosting an event, or even if you're attending an event, be intentional about who you want to talk to, and make sure, if you feel there's a viable sort of, follow-up connection there, that on site setup time, like set up that follow-up meeting, whether it's pushing them a note saying, hey, reminder, let's connect next week, or just like popping them your calendar link in a DM or an email right there. I think capturing the momentum while you have it is so valuable and important. Matt, 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners on event-led growth?
Yeah, I'd say going back to taking a step back from where you were, just if you're planning an event, the curation of the crowd is going to be of the utmost importance. It's going to not only lead to a more successful event for you from an ROI perspective, but it's going to make it easier to gather people not only to that event, but to future events, because the brand credibility it's a very small ecosystem. Whatever ecosystem you sell into is a small ecosystem. People know each other, they connect with each other, they talk to each other. Make sure that you're building a good brand as far as the events that you're putting on.
My last question, which is how we end every episode on this show, fill in the blank. Matt, entrepreneurship is blank.
Exhausting. Exhausting, but exciting. Yeah, with that qualifier.
Entrepreneurship is exhausting, but exciting. I love it. Well, if you were listening to this episode and you had a follow-up question for Matt and you were like, I can't ask him a question because I'm listening wherever I am and Matt's wherever he was at the time of that recording, good news is you have a chance to ask Matt follow-up questions in our quote-unquote after party of this show. It's the Ask Me Anything we're hosting this whole first week. This episode is live inside of our community. That's the Goat to Market Club. It's totally free to join. Matt's going to do an Ask Me Anything this whole first week. So if you have follow-up questions on event-led growth, if you want to talk about being able to connect with your target audience, if you have questions about his tattoos, you can ask him anything inside of Goat to Market Club. Again, it's free to join. And it is accessible at startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. That's startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. The link is also in the show notes. Matt, thank you once again for joining us today on the Goat to Market Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a blast.
That'll put a bow on this one. Before we head out of here, a couple quick housekeeping items. Number 1, did you like what you heard? Well, give us a subscribe and a follow. Maybe share it with one friend who you think would find this valuable. Number 2, remember that Ask Me Anything I told you about at the end of the episode? That goes down exclusively inside of Goat to Market Club, our online founder and startup community. And you can access it for free. Your membership is 100% free at startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. Number 3, need pitch help? Startup Hype Man is your man. Whether it's a fundraising narrative or a go-to-market or category narrative, we've got you covered to make sure you have messaging that doesn't help you just go to market, but of course, what? Helps you become the GOAT to market. All right, we will see you next week here on the Goat to Market Show. Thank you for listening. And remember, why be a unicorn when you can be the GOAT?